Hey everybody, Regan Hagstead here, Mortgage Success Blueprint, and today I wanted to talk about something that I think is just as important in your production and your career growth and growing a business as any of the tips or tricks or marketing or things that you do, and that's making sure that your career path and where you are in your career and where you want to go is aligned with the company you work for. You know, too many times I've seen originators say, I want to do this, but I'm working at a company that's only allowing me to do X, Y, and Z, and in turn, they're just not aligned. And before I really start about this, I want to make it very clear, there's not one best mortgage company out there. There's not one company out there that is hands down the best in every aspect. But what I do think there is there's a best mortgage company for each individual person. And so I really wanted to dive in on that today, kind of take an in-depth look and give some of my thoughts on what's the best fit depending on where you're at. Whether that means best fit because of your production and where you want to go, whether that means best fit because of the quality of life and the style of business you want to generate. So that's one of the key things that I think we want to go over and talk about. So I'm going to start out really talking about loan officers and loan originators and various production levels and what they're going to need to go to that next level and what kind of company they should be at and what kind of support they should have. So this is just the very beginning. I want to kind of give everybody a brief overview, and we're going to start out with loan originators doing about 24 to 36, right? That's 2 to 3 deals per month. And if you're an originator and that's your production level, so the biggest thing that I see there is you need to be in a branch office. You shouldn't be running your own branch. It's not going to be a profitable situation, or you're going to start giving all these concessions on pricing and a variety of other things. And it's just not going to be the way to go. So you need to be in a branch working with a couple things. One, with a branch manager that's helping you, guiding you, teaching you, training you how to do more business, and preferably somebody as a branch manager that's already done it themselves. Two, you're going to need like a shared assistant and a shared processor. And the reason I say that is too many times originators that do 2 to 3 units, they're doing 2 to 3 units because they're a one-man band. They're doing everything. They're taking the application, they're organizing documents, they're doing all but like sending out disclosures, they're checking guidelines, and they're really engrossed in this process. And the problem is, if you're doing 2 to 3 units, the big problem is you have a lead flow issue. You don't have enough clients coming in the door to get to that 5, 6, 7 units per month. And the reason is all your time spent on administrative things, right? And so as you start thinking about like the big picture, if you're doing 2 and 3 and you want to get to 5 and 6, you need to have more time to generate leads. You need to have more time to generate new referral partners, because that's when it's going to take you to the next level. And that's why I say you should be at a branch that's giving you all of this operational and administrative support, because that's really how you're going to go to that next stage. The next section, as far as an originator that I want to touch on, I think a lot of people fall in this category, is 30 to 60 units. Okay, so you're doing maybe 3 to 5 loans a month, and there's a lot of originators out there. And in most cases, again, you're going to be at a branch setup, or if you're just on your own, the challenge is going to be lead flow. But I also think a big key is beyond lead flow, which you need time for, meaning you need great operational support. The other thing that's key is, are you doing 10 loans and then 0? Or are you doing 5, 5, 5, 5? And I think the third factor to consider when you're looking at your production, if you're in a position that your company is aligning with your career and your goals, is out of those 10 loans, am I doing that in a 40-hour work week? Or am I doing that just purely on a 60-hour work week because I'm just powering through everything and I'm making it happen and I'm driving myself crazy and my family never sees me? So when you start thinking about those 3 things, right? Am I doing this 10 and 0? That's because you have, you're kind of willing it through, but you still don't have a great operational support staff. Because if you can do 10 loans a month, but that takes you all of your time and effort, and next month you do 0, you're not consistent. You don't have the support around you to constantly originate, to constantly meet new referrals and bring in deals in the door and leads in the door. Now, if you're powering through it and just working 60 hours a week, I think it's a pretty clear answer. There's no way that you have operational support. As an originator to grow, you need to have the business coming in, talk with the client, finalize program and interest rate, and then move on. Because you can hand it off to somebody who takes it to the finish line. If you're not in a position that you can do that and you're still involved in the files, it's going to be very difficult for your business to grow unless you just spend more time. So I think that's something really, really big to consider. The other aspect when you're looking at this is how many more loans do you want to do? Okay, because 5 units a month, you can make a pretty decent living. And so in some instances, I have originators that say, hey, Regan, I don't have these grand visions to do 700 units in a year or 100 million in volume. They look at it and say, I've got my business, I've got my referral partners, I have the lead flow. What I want is to be able to do my 60 loans and make the same money that I'm doing and just enjoy life and work 30, 35 hours a week. And if that's the case, you better make sure that you're in a branch that has just top-notch, awesome operational support, from processing to assistance to loan officer assistance to, even a team manager or a closing manager that moves the pipeline through. So those are all things to consider really when you're in that 30 to 60 unit category. If you're not getting those, maybe you're not in the right spot. Or if you are getting those, then you realize, okay, I have this support, now it's on me. I'm the one that everything lies on, and that's the place you want to be at. So kind of that next maturation step from an originator is like 65 to 80, 85 units a year. I mean, that's, somewhere between 6 and 7 units a month, 5 and 7 units a month. If you're in that stage, like, you got a lot of stuff figured out. I mean, you are right on the cusp of really breaking through and becoming like a real top producer. And when I say that, it's because I know, like, this is exactly where I was. And through this process, I spent about 2 years kind of in this range. So I saw what needs to happen, and I also figured out what I shouldn't be doing. And so when you're in this range, you need to have a dedicated processor, somebody that only processes your files, not shared, not working on all this other stuff, somebody that you and that person are just in sync. You guys are a team. But you also need a third person. Now, it doesn't need to be a dedicated third person, but you need to have either a shared assistant or a junior or a LOA, something along those lines, because there are tasks when you're doing 7 units a month that you need to start offloading on somebody else. Because if you don't, you will always do 7 units a month. There's just no way to be able to spend the time originating and doing 7 units a month if you don't have 3 total people, you, a processor, and then a third person. Now, that third person could be shared, but you gotta be able to offload some of that stuff to go to that next level. I think the other critical thing when you're in this range is understanding that the ultimate goal at this point is to run a branch, okay? Because when you're running a branch, especially on a P&L model, that's when you're gonna have the most flexibility. You're gonna be able to grow your business the most because you're really running a business, not doing transactions. And it's also where you're gonna become the most profitable. And that's kind of where every originator should kind of say, down the road, if I'm not there now, that's where I need to be. And if you're doing 7 units a month, all dependent on your business type, you may or may not be ready for a branch. Now, I'm not saying you're not ready as far as skills or management or knowledge. I'm just saying from looking at hundreds of different P&Ls and different scenarios throughout my career, I've realized that at 7 units, if you do a lot of government loans, there's enough profit in there to run a great branch. There might even be enough profit in those loans to have a full-time assistant and have a 3-person team. But if you're doing a lot of like down payment assistance products or jumbo loans or brokered loans, there's just not going to be enough spread and juice at 7 units to run your own branch. And if you do run your own branch off those 7 units, you're not going to have very competitive pricing. And the other option is you're going to take a pay cut and have a lower LO comp to make the branch profitable. Neither of those are good things. That's why I'm not a big fan of opening a branch when you don't have the business behind it to really run it effectively. So if you're in this 60 to 85 units or so year type setup, you're right there. You just got to have a few little tweaks, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, that send you to that next level. When you send to that next level and you become a producing branch manager and running your branch and being on a P&L setup, that's when the doors open and the floodgates open to you starting to be able to do 100, 150. And believe me, it takes time to go from 0 to 80. But to go from 80 to 120 or 130, it can happen like that if you set it up correctly. All right, so now let's move on to I'm originating and I do about 85 to call it 150 units a year. Well, at this point, there's no way you should be an originator only. You should be a branch manager, producing branch manager, but you need to be running a branch, because at this level, the volume and the units that you're doing, regardless of your product mix, can be a profitable branch under a P&L system or any other systems out there. There's no way you should just be plugging out loans, okay? And again, keep in mind, this is if it's a referral-based generated business model where you're bringing all the business in. So if you're at this 85 to 150 units, okay, you're making a good amount of money. This is really where you transition from having a job to having a career, because at this point, all the doors are wide open. The sky's the limit. All you really need is some help, some guidance, and a platform that lets you run and doesn't, kind of have a governor on you that's holding you back. And at this stage, you got to have your own processor, your own junior or LOA, and probably even kind of like an underwriting figure or an operations manager or somebody on the team that can really dig into guidelines and understand how to get loans done and structure things. So you need to have 3 team members at this point, especially if you're at that higher end of, let's say 120 to 150 units. You need 3 people to handle this correctly and efficiently. You also need to be on a P&L system where you're going to be able to have flexibility to hire the right people. I've seen mortgage companies having originators that do 150 units, and they say, I've got 2 people on my team, I'd like to get a third. And the company says, oh no, you can't do that. That's insane. Like, if you're doing 150 units the right way, you should have a 3-person team at least. And you need to have the flexibility to make those decisions on your own. Should I hire somebody else? Should I not? Is this going to be a comparable pay to get the right person on board? But this is where all the fun stuff happens, because if you're doing these types of numbers, this is where you can also kind of turn into becoming a mentor for somebody else. This is where you can start hiring those loan officers that you were at one point, doing the 30 units a year or the 50 units a year, and really help bringing them on and along and moving their career. Because as you run your own branch, especially on a P&L, and you're doing these types of units and you start adding some loan officers in there, that's when everything starts growing. That's when it becomes fun. That's when it's a career. That's when you're essentially building your own company within a company. Yeah, you don't have the warehouse lines and you're not selling on the secondary, but for all intents and purposes, you're an origination company all to yourself. And that's where you need to be. If you're getting held back, you're getting governor, having a governor put on you by the company and restrictions and all these other things, or you're getting lumped in to the same, let's say, conveyor belt of underwriting that somebody doing 2 units is, you might not be in the right place. And I'm just telling you this from a lot of years of experience and seeing this and knowing a lot of the different mortgage banking models out there. There are a lot of opportunities to run what I'm talking about. And if you can produce these types of units, you have to take advantage of it. Kind of that last stage to me is 150 units plus. So if you're doing 150 loans up to 500, I don't know, if you're just doing more than 150 units a year, you pretty much got things figured out. You obviously are running a branch, you're obviously on a P&L model, you've got all the fundamentals, you know what you're doing. And at this point, there's only a couple things that I really want to talk about. Is one, at this level, you should be around other top producing people, because that's how new ideas come. That's how you go from 150 to 200 or 200 to 350, is by being around other people, whether it's a network group. You don't have to be at the same company as they do, but you got to start rubbing shoulders and being involved with other top level people. The reason I say that is you've probably nailed down and figured out and know more than 98% of the other folks you're going to be around. And a lot of times the people in management positions at mortgage companies, they're not boots on the ground. They haven't originated for 15, 20 years, so they don't know what you're looking at. They don't really know how they can help you go to that next level. So if you're doing these types of numbers, there's really only a couple things besides being around top people, is you're trying to refine what you do. Because what you do is good, and what you do is working. So now it's about refinement. It's about really dialing in those little details to help make it easier on you and your team. But the bigger thing with refining it is you need to refine it so it can continue to be scaled. And why I say that is scaling and having a scalable thing at this 150 units plus is the only way you're going to continue to go. And this is the only way you're going to have that situation where you're building a company, not just doing transactions. And when I say scalability, I mean if you have a defined flow, you have defined job titles for each person, and each person is, handling, call it 8 or 10 things on a file. and then all of a sudden you do something, or you hire a loan officer in your branch that's going to add another 5 units a month, or you hire 2 and it's going to add another 15 units a month. Your existing staff may not be able to handle that inflow. So what you need to do is have a system that you can scale, that when you bring in additional business, you can hire an additional administrative role to now still run the same as far as efficiency goes. And the other thing that I also want to really make clear to originators doing this type of units is, I have seen originators hit these numbers and be like, oh, life is good, man. I'm making a bunch of money. Everything's on autopilot. I'm selling. I'm bringing on new people. All of a sudden, they just get complacent and their production stalls out. Or in some cases, their production falls backwards, right? You only have to get to this level once. Shouldn't be a constant fight. Once you hit 150, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to stay at 150. And the reason I say that is, you've got so many things that are going on that are good. Now you just need to make sure they stay good. And when you really dig into somebody doing this type of units, okay, you got to think of it this way. Is my team and my model built to do 150? Or is my team for the next year or for the next 2 years? Or is how I'm doing these 150 something that I can do for the next 15 or 20 years? Not saying if you're doing 150 or 300 units that you're going to work for 20 years. I mean, we all know what commission checks look like. I'm just saying you have to have that mindset. Like, do I have something that's just going to be on autopilot, that I can hit these units the same or more every single year for the next 8 or 10 or 15 years? That's how you have to look at it when you've kind of reached this, I don't want to call it the holy grail, but this is like where you're at a pinnacle of the career of the industry. If you're doing 150 units or more, you're in that top few percent. And so that's kind of the mindset I would recommend having when you're in this level. All right, so to kind of put a bow on everything, and like I started off at the very beginning saying, there's not one best mortgage company. It's really about being the best for you and what you're looking to do. And I'll give you 2 quick examples of some originators or managers I've talked to as of late. So we talked to a manager and does a lot of jumbo business. It's all referral based. And the problem he was running into is he's brokering a lot. It's a lot of jumbo, and he's just getting beat up. And he's at a stage in his career, he's been doing this for about 20 years. One of his biggest priorities is the lowest and least amount of stress he can have, as well as working the least amount of hours so he can spend time with his family. And I said, well, are you in like, do you want to grow? Do you want to make more money? Like, do you want to build out a business? And his answer was no. So as we started talking about it, he wasn't a fit for a lot of mortgage banking models. And ultimately, the best fit for him was one of the big 5 banks, because he can show up. He has clients that just show up in the office, come in. He can make his 30 to 50 basis points with his current referral partners. He'll make the level of income that he needs and wants to make. He'll have great health benefits. He'll work his 9 to 5 job and go home. And that's one side of the spectrum. I also talked to somebody else who is running a branch, and they're sitting there saying, man, I'm doing about 55 million a year. We're doing about 14 to 15 units a month. But we just can't get past that. The company we have right now is on a P&L, but it's not a very expansive one. It's kind of a real small, like, restrictive P&L system. I want to do more. I want to hire another administrative person. They've told me no. And I feel like as we start going through the process of submitting to underwriting and doing disclosure, all this other stuff, they make all these rules for the lowest common denominator. And in turn, I know I run a great business, and I'm really dialed in and our files are clean, but I'm having to go through the same process of somebody who doesn't have clean files. And so as we were talking to them, I started realizing, saying, okay, that's one end of the spectrum, was our guy that ended up going to the big bank. Here's somebody else who is in a P&L model, kind of, but they need to be in a better one. And so to just kind of wrap things up, as you can see, every single person, based on where they are in their career, what their production is, what their goals are, should really consider, am I at the right place? And if you are, that's awesome, because then the sky's the limit. But if you're not, that can be holding somebody back just as much as not having good marketing or the right pitch or the right messaging or all these other things that we talk about in other segments. So it's really something to consider, that you're on the right team and at the right company. So with that being said, that's all I have, food for thought as far as working at the right place. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave some comments below. Feel free to reach out anytime. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day.